What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do we have a special guest. My man, Shirl Penney is in the house. What's up, Shirl?
Hey, Darius. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. Oh, man, I'm so glad to have you on the show, Shirl. Your name has come up in so many circles that I'm moving within these days, and was glad to finally get you on here to get to talk to you about all the great things you're doing in the world. Before we get started, though, do you mind if I do a little bit of housekeeping for our new listeners to the show?
Absolutely. Go for it.
So for listeners who are new to the show, The Greatness Machine, we're about two things: people living their passions and those creating greatness in the world and doing so despite the odds. My friend Shirl here is neither short of passion nor greatness. So, Shirl, your name has come up in a lot of circles. I mentioned earlier before the show that your name came up with my friend Russ Norwood. My business partner at Rise is Joe Duran, who I know you've known for a long time. Great friend of mine, Russ Norwood. I was just having dinner with him last night. Here in Austin, Texas, and you're a pretty well known guy. People have spoken greatly about you in the RIA world. So kudos to you, my man. Like you have a great reputation, and that obviously speaks volumes to the awesome work that you're doing, my friend.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Darius.
I want to give your formal bio. So, a lot of the listeners in the show know that I've now gotten into the world of the RIA world with Rise. And, like I said, you're a big name in that industry. You're the founder, president, and CEO of Dynasty Financial Partners. You guys are managing nearly 100 billion of assets under management. And on the entrepreneurial front, we got a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the show. You were recently named in 2023 the Florida Entrepreneur of the Year by the Tampa Bay Business Times. So, man, just awesome work, my friend. I'd love if you wouldn't mind, though, here at the Greatness Machine, we love origin stories, and I would love if you wouldn't mind, giving some of your background, some of your origin story. How did you get to where you got to?
Yeah, look, I think, Darius, and it's great to see you, and thanks for having me on. We're all living our own unique version of the American dream. And my origin story is probably not your most typical journey to Wall Street, if you will. I'm from a small fishing village in Maine called Eastport, Maine. And I was raised by my step-grandfather. I was orphaned before that, and my step-granddad took me in. And we were homeless when I was 11, 12, 13, lived with different neighbors. It turns out, being homeless is actually great training to become an entrepreneur. It forces you to do more with less, but had perfect attendance, K through 12. My granddad forced me to be present in school, wanted me to ultimately have a job where I work with my mind, not my hands. He'd worked manual labor pretty much his whole life. Fourth grade education, was actually handicapped, had overcome quite a bit, but he was very present. And I'm a big believer in, just being, if one person is present and believes in a child, they can really change their life for the better. And he did that for me. Went off to college in Maine at Bates College so I could stay closer to home. To see my granddad at least once a month. And thankfully I did that, Darius, because the day before I graduated college, he died in my arms.
Oh my gosh.
So imagine having your whole family, you lose them at once. It was a pretty lonely feeling, but I always knew I wanted to make my way to Wall Street, wanted to work in finance. So I bought a suit for $13 at the Salvation Army, and I rode a bus 16 hours from the sticks of Maine to Wall Street. And I got an interview at Smith Barney, which was right before it was merging or being acquired by Citigroup, as you recall, back in the late 90s. Mm-hmm. And ended up getting hired there, worked my way up, moved around the country, loved working with financial advisors, being in the field, helping them work with their clients, moved to Los Angeles, San Francisco, back to New York. But at 28 years old, I think, if you can believe it, I was running private wealth management, the high net worth division. At 30, was running global sales. And then at 32, I left to found Dynasty, inspired in large part, Darius, by the firm's top clients that I kept meeting sitting on the other side of the table. Vast majority of them were entrepreneurs.
Right.
And after a decade or so, which was an incredible place to grow up and learn the business, I thought it would be time for me to take a chance to sit on the other side of the table and leave and launch my own business, which became a platform service provider, as you alluded to RAs. And I launched that business. I left Citigroup in '08. It took 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days to go without a paycheck. My wife kept track before we officially, coming out of the financial crisis in '08, '09, officially launched Dynasty at the end of 2010.
Wow, man. That's an incredible story. I want to, if you wouldn't mind, just out of curiosity, you said that you were you were brought up by your step grandfather. Did your parents pass away when you were young? Was that part of what happened?
Yeah. So where I'm from, it's called Washington County, Maine. It's one of the poorest counties in the country. Actually, it's over 50% unemployment.
Wow.
And unfortunately, there are quite a number of teenagers, some whom are in high school, that get pregnant, and that includes my mother, who had me when she was 16. And my father, I grew up on the border of Canada. He was Canadian. I've actually never met my father. And my step granddad just didn't want me to be adopted and maybe go to a tough environment. So at 60 years old, with no money, I mean, he was dirt poor. He decided to take me in
Wow.
and raise me. And like I said, it was an incredible blessing because he was very present. I played a bunch of sports growing up, and I was blessed that academics were relatively easy, but he never missed a parent-teacher conference. He never missed a sporting event, even though Darius, I'm sure he didn't know the rules to most of the sports I was playing because he couldn't play sports when he was a kid. He was working, as the oldest boy in a family of 8 during the Depression.
Wow.
He was working, but he was always there and forced me to get to school early, stand in the snowbank in the middle of winter, just to make sure I was on time at school, and was my biggest cheerleader. And I always knew I had unconditional love from him, and he was remarkable. I have 2 daughters now, Darius, and his name was Clarence Townsend. So my 18-year-old daughter, her name is Townsend.
Nice.
After his last name.
Yeah.
And our younger daughter, her name is Anne Claire, and the Claire is from Clarence. So they'll both tell you that they're named after one of their angels.
I love that, man. That's a really beautiful story. So he passed away. You said he had passed away when you were 12. Is that correct?
No, he passed away the day before I graduated from college. And in fact,
got it. When you were 22.
Yeah,
Okay.
Bates was great. They sent my diploma early so I could give it to him. He got to see it before he passed, and he was buried with it because he sacrificed a lot more for that college. I was the first person in my family to go off to college, graduate college. And so I gave him the diploma, and he got to see it before he passed. And like I said, he was buried with it. Subsequent to that, Bates was great. They reprinted one, and I do have my diploma now, but the original one is appropriately with him.
I love that, man. So you decided to get into Wall Street. I think I'm 46, so you're a little bit younger than me. Isn't that correct?
No, 1 year older, 47.
Oh shit! All right, so we graduated right around the same time, late 90s, and obviously that was kind of like that. Depending on where you graduated, there you were either like I was like a few months late from the .com bust, right? You were probably a few months early, so you caught the tail end of it. But that was an interesting time in the market because you had 9/11 happen right after that. But you ended up going to New York. Sounds like just with very little to your name, and with big dreams to do big things. Were you always someone that had like big aspirations?
Yes, and I always had a fascination with numbers and with math and with finance. A bit self-taught. We had a lot of tourists in the part of Maine that I was from on the coast, and I would get to know various families that would come back year over year, and I would ask them to bring me various publications. And imagine getting the Wall Street Journal that's 6 months old, or it was helpful for me to learn the language. The prices obviously might have changed a bit. But for my birthday or for the holidays, I would ask people, to give me subscriptions to different finance magazines. And I was just always reading and convinced my high school, which was a non-accredited high school, just my graduating class was 22 kids.
Wow.
To teach me economics. So I had a professor who taught me one-on-one economics, which was fabulous. Great guy. Took a lot of care in me back then, given my situation. Convinced the high school to start the stock market game.
Nice.
So when I went off to Bates, I actually was one of the founders of the Investors Club at Bates, which is now, I think, one of the larger clubs on campus. So always fascinated, like I said, by finance. But the challenge for me was obviously, how do I navigate getting from the sticks of Maine, where I didn't know anyone in New York, didn't know anyone in the industry. And all I had, was the knowledge that I was self-taught and an incredible work ethic. And, when I finally got to New York, and I'd never, Darius, seen a revolving door or an escalator in my life. So I'm navigating that at your listeners that remember 388 Greenwich Street, back in the day, which was one of, Sandy Weil, who was founded and running the business, his pride and joy, that building. I navigated through those things that day and spent a full day interviewing. And I just said, I'll outwork anyone. At the end of the day, I'm not necessarily going to be the smartest person in the room, but I'm going to control what I can control. And, that's positive attitude and hard work and ride for the team. And they said, great, come back next week for a second round interview. And I said, do you know what I had to do to get here for this one? Like, I got to go all the way back to Maine and come back. And so the first time I ever flew, they bought me an airline ticket to fly back from Bangor, Maine, down to New York, the following week. And I got the job, and, the rest of it is somewhat history.
Wow, man. Going back to your granddad, you said he was did manual labor. Like, what kind of manual labor was he?
He did everything from working in rock quarry, like super hard, manual labor, to he cleaned wood stoves and oil stoves. So in that part of Maine, back in the day, most of the heating was done from a wood stove. In fact, some of my earliest memories, we would fill up. I grew up in the house that fell down that got condemned was 300 square feet. And we would, in the fall, fill the house up with wood, which we would chop and store ourselves. And we would get up every couple of hours. We slept in one little double bed. We shut the house down to one little room. And my granddad and I would get up every couple hours, taking turns feeding the wood stove.
Wow,
and not that uncommon where I'm from. I didn't feel, quote unquote, poor until I was homeless. Where I can tell you being cold and hungry for a longer period of time is quite a motivator. But everyone there is kind of in the same boat, I guess, pun intended, since it's a fishing village. And it takes a community to raise a child. When I go home, which I do every year for the 4th of July, it's an incredible community. I like to think they're very proud, of what I've achieved. And, I've been, in the local parade, and we have a lot of scholarships that my wife and I have set up there in my granddad's name, and we help the community in quite a number of ways. It's a special place where not everyone has much, but what they have is a lot of love and support and admiration, for each other. And it really is that old school sense of community. And that's what, gave me my foundation. And candidly ties into Dynasty, which we might talk about, which is how we build a community amongst advisors. A lot of that is, what I learned, as a child growing up in Eastport, Maine.
I love that, man. So yeah, let's move through that. So you ended up getting the job at Smith Barney. One question for you, like, having grown up, I was thinking about this as you were talking, having grown up in, an environment that was obviously where you didn't have much from a material perspective. And then going to a school like Bates, which is, liberal arts, private school. Was that a bit of a culture shock for you, or how did that feel?
Yes. Incredible culture shock. I got a fair amount of financial aid, some scholarships that I applied for, but I had to borrow quite a bit of money, which I, worked really hard my first 3 or 4 years out of school to pay back. I actually had to borrow money to bury my grandfather after he passed. I mean, we really didn't have much. I mean, everything that we had earned, we needed to live on. I remember when I was younger, we lived off less than $6,000 a year for the two of us.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, just like I said, I mean, the fiscal discipline, and we can talk about, how we manage the balance sheet at Dynasty and a fortress balance sheet. A lot of that just comes from, how I grew up and some of the mentorship from my granddad in terms of just being disciplined with money and limiting how much you borrow and not spending more you can afford. And those types of things are, what I learned from him. But yes, when I went to Bates, I actually ended up spending probably more time with the international students than maybe anyone else because we could relate to each other. So many of them were first generation college attendees that were there on scholarship. I didn't at that time, connect as well, with my peers that had several $100 a week allowances, driving, expensive cars. And, I had like the old Blues Brothers, Dodge Diplomat that I bought for $600 and busted the rust out and hand painted it myself. And it was a total piece of junk, but it got me, home to see my granddad, once a month. So, yeah, but that's, it was great. Not a lot of diversity where I was from in Maine. So going off to college, gave me, a great opportunity to meet people from different cultures, different backgrounds. It was a bit of a culture shock, in particular, the some of the wealth levels that I didn't have experience with. But that was nothing like when I went off to Wall Street, and I went from when I'm a teenager standing in line, waiting for a block of government cheese to come off the back of a truck in the middle of December in the sticks of Maine, to then telling a billionaire what they should do with their money post an IPO and how to invest it, right? So that's a pretty profound, change of circumstances. But again, as I said at the onset, what a country. I mean, this country is remarkable. And if you're willing to work hard and chase your dreams, anything's possible in America.
Did you, like kind of using that perspective around, that's a pretty wide gap there, right? Going from, get essentially like welfare, being on welfare to, or some version of it to, advising a billionaire. And when you saw that, and it's interesting, I had a former guest on the show. He's actually from Boston, ended up in prison for like, I don't know, 18 years or something like that. And now he did a lot of prison reform. And I asked him a question once, just around, around like wanting something different. And he ended up in a life of crime. And then he got out of that. And now he's a fellow at Harvard, very interesting guy, Andre Norman. And he's like, look, man, you don't know what you don't know. You know what you know. Like so growing up in an environment, you only know what you know. You only know what you're exposed to. And if you're not exposed to these other things in life, then you don't know that you're missing out on it, or B, that it's a possibility, right? And so having grown up in an environment that sounds like there was a lot of poverty, and then moving to a Bates where you're around a bunch of kids. And I'm going to put this in perspective because some of our listeners who are maybe younger than us will not even know some of the things you just said. Like $6,000 a month doesn't sound like a lot of, or $6,000 a year doesn't sound like a lot of money. I'm going to give some perspective because we're almost the same age. I grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood which is interesting because I was around a lot of wealth growing up. But my parents were like, hey, dude, too bad. Like, you have to work. And like, my dad owned gas stations. I was a gas station attendant from like the age of 10 until I was 18. Right. And my dad was not born here, immigrated here. My mom was born here, but she was born in a Western Pennsylvania steel mill town. Right. So I grew up around family that had like a very scarcity mindset around money in an upper middle class area, which in of itself is almost like you're living in a culture shock, right? And in my family, was had, my dad did pretty well, but my mom lived off $3,500 a month and could barely like pay for everything a month. And you're talking about 6,000 a year. And this is at the exact same time. Like we're almost the same age. Right. So like that is really a difficult thing to grow up around. And obviously it's what you knew. So you guys made the best of it. But to go to Bates and to start to see like pretty much, I have a lot of friends that went to Williams and, Swarthmore and these schools. Like it's ridiculous, man. These kids, like, I mean, I grew up around kids like this where it's like brand new Mitsubishi 3000 GTs and Benzes and Beamers. And I'm like, I'm driving, you said $600 car. I was driving a $500 1982 Toyota long bed pickup that some dude left at my dad's station because he didn't want to pay for the repairs, So was that the first time when you had some exposure to people that had, and you're like, hey, I want that? Is that what kind of came up for you?
Yeah, a little bit. I think my motivation, though, really started, back when I was younger, and I just remember seeing the incredible sacrifice that my granddad had made. Right, I mean, he went to bed hungry many nights so that he could give me that $2, to go buy, school lunch the next day.
Wow.
And I think part of my motivation was definitely to make my granddad proud, given everything that he'd sacrificed for. But I do think, with a lot of entrepreneurs, but certainly with a lot of kids, I say this a lot when I get to speak at schools that maybe are largely representative of some underprivileged kids, which I enjoy being able to do, and hopefully, try to inspire, some of the kids there. I think what they see is what they'll be.
Yeah.
And, having, role models that have overcome, tremendous adversity, which I do believe builds character, gives them, courage and confidence that, look, if she or he could do it, then I can do it too. And yeah, so for me, seeing, not in any, smug or arrogant way, but, seeing some of the other families, getting to meet, some of the parents. I did intern at Smith Barney in Portland, Maine, my junior year, which was great, to learn more about the business, but also to see, to your point, Darius, how much some of these people were making. And, thought, look, I can outwork some of these people. I'm not saying that I'm smarter than anyone, but I can maximize the effort. And for me, I was reading. I was just a sponge for information. I was reading all night, all weekend, very passionate, which is something I know you talk a lot about, on the show, right? Is passion.
Mm-hmm.
I was passionate for, changing the trajectory of my life and that of my family. But really passionate about, financial services. I was large part, self-taught. And, not to go off on a tangent on this, but I can tell you, because I lived it firsthand, that the financial health of this country, broadly speaking, is not very good. And in a lot of ways is getting worse with wealth inequality, issues. With 75% of Americans not being able to put their hand on $1,000 in an emergency, which was us growing up, which means you're one, leaky roof or your car breaking down so you can't get to work, away from disaster. Could you lose your job? You look at state pension funds, number of them going broke, state budgets that can't get balanced, talk about the federal deficit, which continues to get worse. And so, for me, the way I think you can drive improvement is through financial literacy, financial advice, independent financial advice. It's not from selling people products that they don't need. And, when I went off to Wall Street, I was a bit naive, which can be a good thing, right? Because when you're naive, you don't think about the odds. Right. I mean, the odds of me sitting here and having this conversation with you about my career journey are 10 million to 1, right? But if you sat back and thought about that, right, most rational people would never do it. But so I never, for me, I just thought I'll figure it out. I'll work hard. I'm a bit of a half, glass full. I'm an optimist, and I always think my best days are in front of me. And so went off to Wall Street and did it. But when I got there, I realized that so much of the industry really was more about product sales,
Right.
as that you know. And part of my inspiration of leaving after a decade, and again, it was a great place to learn the business, was to try to change the industry for the better, because product sales is not what's going to change. My big why, my big motivator, given how I grew up, is how do we improve the financial wellness of so many people in this country. And I thought fundamentally the way to do it was to advocate for and advance the industry from an independent advice perspective. And that's why I was so excited to leave Wall Street and start a business, called Dynasty Financial Partners, which is now the largest platform for RIAs, registered independent advisors, in the country. And I like to think that we punch a bit above our weight in terms of driving positive change in the industry around some of those key issues that I just articulated.
What so for listeners who are not from the financial services world, don't know what an RIA is, like you just gave a great example of what the word means, but you grew up in wealth through Citibank or through Citi, and that whole thing over there, and it came up to the head of private wealth you had mentioned.
Yep.
What was it like? Because '08 was a pretty messy time, especially at that point. '08, what say? I was 30. You would have been 31 years old, right? 31, 32 years old. I mean, for people that don't remember or they were not in it, it was a gnarly time, like in the world. Like I was in lending for 23 years until I got into the RIA space. So I'm like a newbie to this space, but 5+ years in financial services. And I was a subprime lender, which was probably the worst place you could be. Second worst being anything in financial services. What was it where you're like, man, right now is the time for me to go out on my own? Like the world's falling apart. Like, what was the motivation for you?
Yeah, one of the great stories, I've told it a few times. I think you might find it interesting, Darius. So I was sitting with a billionaire who you'd know, a very well-known tech entrepreneur. We had taken the business public, and we were coming out of lunch, and Sandy Weil, who was the chairman and CEO of Citigroup at the time, had just met with the client, and the advisor who was working with him, I think, was off in the restroom. So it was just two of us sitting there. And he said, look, well, let me ask you a couple things. He said, number one, why would a client of my size ever buy retail? I'm an institutional client. Right? Why would I go through an advisor to get institutional services from an organization like Citi? And he said, I have a family office, and we started having a conversation. It was a fascinating conversation. Brilliant, brilliant entrepreneur. And I still have it. I wrote down on a napkin this little triangle, which later, when I started Dynasty a number of years later, I coined the phrase, and we've trademarked it since, the triangulation of advice. What I realized from that conversation is the way ultra wealthy in this country who have family offices think about how they receive wealth management advice is advice separate from safe custody and separate again from where products are manufactured and sold across the industry, right? So advice separate from custody, separate from products, which eliminates the conflicts.
Who's listening to this, you get your advice from a person that has no vested interest. They don't hold your money, which is because
they only work for you, and their job is to give you their best thinking and best advice.
So their job, they get paid to give you advice, and that's it. Whatever.
That's it.
They do not get any incentive on what product you get. They do not get any incentive for holding the asset. All they get is they paid to give you advice, which sounds pretty good.
And then separately, you say, where do I feel safe in terms of housing my money? That's what a custodian is. So
like Schwab or Pershing. Or
Schwab, Fidelity, right, Pershing. If you want to house your assets at Goldman Sachs, I mean, any of those firms, they're going to do your trading and your safe, custody of assets, record keeping. And then separately, you say, I need a loan. I need a mortgage. I need an insurance policy. I need, to buy, private credit. I'm going to go to Apollo or Blackstone, or I'm going to go to BlackRock, right? You can go to any of the product providers to implement the strategies recommended by the advisor, but there's no economic connectivity between the advisor, the custodian, or the product providers. And what this individual was telling to me is where I worked at the time, brokerage, the wirehouses, right? The banks, it's siloed. You have an employee, right? The broker / advisor works for the custodian, which is also the product manufacturer.
Right.
Right. Siloed model, which is how the vast majority of Americans get their advice today, is fraught with conflict.
Right.
And given how I grew up, Darius, it hit me in that moment, what if I could go build a business model that democratized the triangulation of advice?
Interesting.
So that wasn't just reserved for that billionaire. What if it is the retired school teacher and police officer in Portland, Maine, who have saved their whole life for $500,000 in retirement assets, right? Can they have an independent advisor that's powered by Dynasty sitting up in Portland, Maine, that can then custody their assets anywhere they want, like you said, Schwab, Fidelity, Pershing, Goldman, wherever, and can get products with now, as you said earlier, $100 billion of buying power behind them, which is what Dynasty provides. So it's fundamentally changed the way people think about receiving their wealth management in this country. And it's why you literally see now hundreds of billions of dollars a year leaving the banks and brokerage houses and going to the independent channel, because the end consumer, the client, is fundamentally realizing it's a better model for them. But that light bulb for me went off, 16, 17, 18 years ago, sitting in that meeting with that individual from that conversation. And from that, chase my dream to go sit on the other side of the table and build a business model that fit a need in the marketplace, which was to make it easy for an advisor to go independent. An advisor can leave, pick a firm and start their own independent RIA. And Dynasty takes care of all the middle and back office operations to make it easy for them to move their clients over and service them in a new triangulated advisory model, which is what advisors want to do, and it's what clients are asking for.
So when you left Citi to start this, was it just you? Did you have a business partner? Like, tell us a little bit about the origin story there.
Yeah, it was my wife, the original co-founder, who proofread all the original business plans. Incredible story. I was so we were up in Saratoga Springs because we had a vacation home there. We love the racehorses and just having a backyard for our two daughters up there. And when I left to start this journey, we didn't know it was going to be 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. We thought it'd be much quicker, but this was April of 2008. I sold all my Citigroup stock in the low 30s, thankfully, on the way to 90 cents or wherever it bottomed out. And that was kind of the seed capital, to start the business. And I would go down to Manhattan, trying to raise capital and get some early stage employees and team members put together and to build the original board. And I came back after one of those trips, and she had built an office for me in our garage. And it was beautiful. Hardwood floors, crown molding, a fireplace, had air conditioning, a flat screen TV, took up about a third of our garage, little house that we had up there. And she said it had to be nice because a big time CEO is going to sit in this office. So sweet of her to do it. But we eventually raised the capital from a bunch of individuals. I had worked with a gentleman named Todd Thompson. Todd was CFO of Citi. He was the chairman of the wealth business when I worked there, so I'd work for him. He ended up backing me along with Jerry Eberhardt, who was another senior executive from Smith Barney, who I knew. Harvey Golub, who's our chairman now. Harvey ran American Express and really understood what we were trying to do. We had another private equity executive named Jim Brown, who wrote one of the first checks, not through his fund, but just personally, because he'd been following the space and had a lot of great ideas for us in terms of, how we could build and scale the business. the Glick family out of New York, just incredible people and professional investors. So we kind of put together, this who's who from Wall Street and finance because they saw the vision and what we were trying to do. And they wrote checks and backed it and have supported it candidly ever since. We've done 6 capital raises since we launched the business, Darius, and most of the original investors have invested in all of those rounds.
What would you mind telling us how much you raised in the first round?
Because I guess kind of a fun stat. This was a completely new concept, a platform for RIAs. No one ever heard of it. So like you kind of stick your finger up and what's it worth, right? It's worth the piece of paper it's written on and what I could sell the value at. I raised the original round $5 million of capital on a $15 million valuation.
Okay. Wow.
The last round was a bit higher than that. I think we're approaching close to a 20x return from those original investors.
Nice, man. That's awesome. I love that. That's such a cool story. So Dynasty is really a platform, and I know a bit about it just because of I'm like you. It's funny when you're describing yourself. I'm like, God, we have a lot in common. Like I'm a super curious guy and like learner, and especially coming in, you can imagine leaving a space that I spent 20 plus years in and coming into the RIA space. I'm like, oh, there's so much shit to learn. Like I'm like a kid in a candy store, and Joe being my business partner, it's like. There's very few people you get to partner with that really know the space like he does, right? So I'm just always taking notes when I'm around him. But so the way I understand it is you guys are essentially, and maybe I have this wrong. Are you a TAMP essentially? Like you're essentially a professional platform for people to leave. You cover all the back office. You have the partnerships with the custodians, the product folks, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think we're probably the most diverse end-to-end integrated solution for RIAs. So yes, we are a TAMP. So of the 100 billion or just shy of 100 that's on the platform, a little over 50 of it is on our TAMP. So we're providing access to separate managed accounts and alternative investments and the like. But our largest business is the integrated wealth technology. So at our core, we're a wealth tech business. So think about, a lot of your listeners would be familiar, with Netflix. Right, where you can have an integrated, chassis where you can get all the various content you want in one place. We built, a very robust version of Netflix for the RIA, the independent advisor space, so they can go in and in one location get all of the tools that they need to run their business. So they get information on their business, information on, the investment markets, access to their CRM. Financial planning tools, for their clients. Everything is in one place. So that integrated middle and back office, that is our largest business. So think of all 100 billion being on that platform. Then the advisors can choose to run the investments on their own, or they can use our investment platform. About half of the investments and growing are now being implemented off of our turnkey asset management platform, the TAMP, as you mentioned, Darius. We also have a capital business where we will make minority investments in the advisor businesses, but we have a full service investment bank. So we do a lot of buy side, sell side representation of RIAs. We've launched 7 businesses in the last less than 36 months who have enterprise value over 100 million. So these businesses are launching now with billions of dollars of assets that they're bringing with them, and they need real investment banking support, on raising capital going forward. And then our last business is called Dynasty Connect, which connects end investors who are looking for an independent advisor. So they'll come to us, we profile them, and then we connect them, with the most appropriate advisor on our platform. And that has really been exploding for a lot of the reasons that we just discussed, as more and more consumers are realizing they want an independent advisor. But the challenge is there's 32,000 of these independent advisors now. So Dynasty is, for the business, think of us as the Intel sticker that's powering the device. But to the end consumer, we're a bit of the good housekeeper seal of approval for independent advice. So I want one of those advisors to give me advice separate from where products are manufactured and sold, but I don't know where to start and how to find one. Let me go to Dynasty and they'll help me get connected with one that has clean compliance, great technology, access to capital, $100 billion of buying power. So more and more consumers are coming to us to get connected to, a world-class independent RIA.
I love that, man. So right now, how many advisors are on the platform total right now?
About 375.
Nice. So you guys have a really, that's a nice book. And so you said you guys are making investments. When did you guys start making investments in these firms?
Yeah. So the original business, and look, it's all about innovation, right? And I talk a lot here that, Dynasty has to be the business that leapfrogs and beats Dynasty. And we spend a lot of time listening to our client, and our primary client's the advisor.
Right.
So we started as a wealth tech business. And then a couple years in, the advisor said, we want you to help us curate the investment options. So about 8-9 years ago, we started the TAMP because our clients were asking for it. And then about 6 or 7 years ago, our clients came to us and said, we need friendly growth capital. So we started, and we had a very strong balance sheet. So we started using our balance sheet to deploy capital to support them. And about 3 years ago, our client said, we would like you to be not just an outsourced back office, but can you be an outsourced front office? Can you help us make introductions of advisors that maybe want to join our business as well as clients? So we launched Dynasty Connect to connect advisors that want to join RIAs and to connect investors. So continuing to innovate based upon what our clients are telling us that they need for us to deliver on their behalf.
What do you so right now, like you've obviously done a great job building this business over the last 16 plus years to becoming a national brand, a national company, huge enterprise value. You've done really a great job to create value for yourself and for the investors that believed in you. And it really is. I was just naming while you were talking, I was naming the title of this episode, and I wrote "Living the American Dream." Right, like truly is like living the American dream here. And you talk about your entrepreneurial story, and I being like a lover of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial stories, just I'm like, this is such a cool story. What's next, man? Like, I'm assuming like you want to like keep the business forever. Do you want to like take it public? Do you think you want to sell it? What if you had to like pick one of those three? What do you think is the most likely outcome for you guys?
Yeah. When people ask me what's next, oftentimes I say more. Like never. I own racehorses, and a friend of mine, another great entrepreneur that you should have on, named Mike Rapoli. He founded Vitamin Water and Body Armor. He's done a lot of incredible work in the consumer brand space. He owns Noble now with Tom Brady. He's going to do some great things there. So he and I named Dynasty together. Which means winning consistently, sustained excellence. We're both sports fans, and influenced a bit by Tom and Bill Belichick, which I've told them both about, although I've given them, no money for royalties or equity in the business tied to it. But, for us, it's what I have so much fun now, Darius, is seeing, my baby, the platform that we've built, how it can transform so many lives in a positive way. Whether it's the teammates that we have here, we just took down a whole nother floor. We renamed our building here in St. Pete. We moved the business to Florida 5 years ago. It's the Dynasty Tower, the new sign on the building. And, we're hiring like crazy. We have 25 job openings right now to, keep up with the growth. We just had by far the best 6 months in terms of new signings. In the history of the company, tens of billions of dollars of new signing. So seeing how it can transform our clients' lives, it can give their clients a better model of how they receive their advice, as we've talked about, seeing the impact we're having on the ecosystem, right? You talked about some of these other entrepreneurs. I love, being independent, but not alone, right? And being around peers and collaborating and being helpful to the ecosystem. I think it's very early innings, like very, very early innings. I think it's an essential industry, helping with, the financial wellness. I think it's even a matter of national security, given the strength of the country's balance sheet. Number one cause of divorce in America, financial stress, right? So it ties to the health of the family unit at home. So I believe passionately in what it is we're doing and the impact we can make. So at 47, God willing, I'll do it for at least another 10 years. Maybe at some point, I become chairman of the business and there's better people to operate the business. But right now, I love being CEO. I love sitting in this seat and being able to grow the business and make a lot of the change that we discussed. I have had some conversations with my wife about down the road, giving back. We do have a family foundation, and we give back a lot of military charities. I'm big supporter of military who are the protectors of the American dream. We do a lot around education, financial literacy. The Dynasty Foundation its primary focus is around financial literacy related issues. But I have had some conversations maybe about politics. I could go back to my home state of Maine down the road, maybe run for U.S. Senate is something my wife and I have talked about. But that is a long time down the road. I may never get there. But right now, like I said, for the next decade or so, it's head down, looking to grow the business. We did file to go public about almost 24 months ago now. Russia invaded Ukraine. IPO window closed. I was on the road show. I'd probably spoken to 50 investors. Things were going pretty well. But when the IPO window closed, we pivoted. I sold a piece of the business to Schwab, which, as you know, is the largest player in the RIA space. So having them as a partner has been fabulous. As a strategic investor, we sold a small piece to a financial sponsor, Abry Partners up in Boston. They've been awesome partners. InvestNet, who's a wealth tech business, peer of ours in the space. They came in as a strategic investor over 5 years ago. And a number of our clients, a number of our advisor firms have also invested in the business. So there's nice alignment there. So we have a fortress balance sheet. We have a great brand, an all-star roster of clients, an incredible team. So shame on the team and I if we don't take full advantage of this opportunity that sits in front of us over the next multiple years.
I love that, man. How many employees are there in the company in total right now?
I'll be directionally right. We're growing so fast. I would probably about 160 or so. The vast majority of those are here in St. Pete.
Okay.
We are a work from work company, meaning that most people are in here 5 days a week here in St. Pete. But we do have some remote offices and we have some remote team members because we find in particular, from a network development or service or transition perspective, it's good to be proximate in the time zone where our clients are. So we have some people on the West Coast, in the Midwest, up in the Northeast. But most of the home office operations team members are here in St. Pete.
Yeah, I love that, man. So you guys, including advisors, are just over about 500 people right now?
Including advisors and their staff. No, it's probably, if I said, if you said what's the total number that's on kind of the benefits programs that we aggregate for everyone, it's probably Darius closer to 1,000.
And now the way and it's interesting the way you said it is like the client's really the advisor. Are they on their own ADV or are they on your guys' ADV?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're a B2B company primarily, although we do some direct to consumer stuff, but it's really as an advocate on behalf of our advisor on the Dynasty Connect business. We support truly independent advisors that own the majority of their firm. I talk about it as positive selection bias. So a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this, would understand this. When people sell out and they take all the economic incentive off the table that's in front of them, I call that negative selection bias. Most entrepreneurs tend not to grow as fast once they sell out their company versus when they're truly working for themselves. So Dynasty is primarily powering business owners, so advisors who own their LLC, they own their business, and they own their ADV, which is the regulatory documentation, connecting them with the SEC, not to get into too much detail on that, but it's truly their own business. They're not renting my ADV or anyone else's. They're truly independent, and they're getting integrated technology and investment capability, acumen, product, as well as the capital and the other things that I mentioned from a partner, Dynasty, who has to stand and deliver on behalf of them. And if I don't, then I get fired. Just like if they don't stand and deliver on behalf of their end client, they get fired.
Yep.
So there's a beauty, right, in the alignment, as opposed to if the advisor works for some national bank, right, their job is to sell the bank's products, right, to their client, which is a completely different alignment from the independent one that we've been discussing here today.
What so you said you guys provide, and I know we're getting towards the end of the show. I have one more question, and then I want to go to the greatness question. Number one, man, dude, I really appreciate all this. This has been a really fun conversation, and your stories, really epic stories. So kudos to you for building an awesome company and for just the story in general, man. The great come up story. So much entrepreneurism here in this room right now. Like I'm loving it. But
yeah, what I would just say, what I love about your show, and having listened to a number of them, I'm a big believer that success is best when shared. And my wife and I, share our success. We're blessed to have lots of family and friends, and that's what you're doing, right? I mean, what you're doing here is you're having people, share their success, right? And there's no better way to share than with knowledge. And you're spreading it out in the ecosystem. And I'm sure, Darius, you're having a much bigger impact on people than you probably hear. So good on you for having the vision to do this. And I appreciate the invite.
Thank you. I appreciate that as well. So I'm going to ask you a tactical question just because I'm just curious. And then I want to go to the greatness question. Are you guys, so you provide benefits for all these folks? Did you set up a PEO or a partnership with a PEO? How do you guys, or do you just run the benefits through your platform?
Yeah, we run the benefits through the platform. And, whether it's benefits or it's scaled access, to investment management product, or, custody, servicing, we think about, we're of such scale now where we can kind of build a firm within a firm, right? So if we're going to Schwab, we're asking them for, dedicated, service, premium type service on behalf of our advisors. And if we're, going, to our partners on the asset management side, right, where, when we have tens of billions of dollars of buying power, it buys, access, and oftentimes scaled pricing that benefits the advisors, but perhaps more importantly, it benefits their end client that's working with them.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's so cool. God, it's such an interesting business. I've again coming into a new industry, and then the wealth management field is so dynamic, and there's so many aspects to it. I grew up in the lending world. I did the equivalent of like retail, then wholesale, then wholesale for wholesale, right? So I ended up building, and I ended up building the equivalent of what's a custodian in the wealth management space. That also
it's one of those moments. I'll just say real quick, Darius, where the alignment of interest, right? It's so pure, and it's one of those things. And I know I'm biased when I say this, but I can back it up. Where seemingly everything's better, right? You go from an environment where most of even these big advisors working at the brokerage firms are making 45 to 50% of the revenue they generate. The average gross income of an advisor on our platform is in the mid 60s, right? So you're generating a third more income than you were previously, and you get to deliver, a better service quality with modern technology, with more product access, better price implementation on behalf of your client, and you own your own business. So at any point in the future, if you monetize it, it's long-term capital gains tax. And I don't have to tell you this, the valuations of these registered independent advisory firms are at an all-time high, right? So client wins, the staff wins, the advisors win, the ecosystem is flourishing. I mean, if you kind of understand some of these the underlying dynamics of the space, then I think it's easy to see what I said earlier. It's early innings, and there's just going to be some tremendous winners that are powering this movement. that I think is going to continue for many, many years.
I couldn't agree more, my friend. And I'm glad we're here trying to make a difference in the ways that we are as well as you guys. So it's cool to have some like-minded folks in the room. You ready for the greatness question, Shirl?
Let's do it.
All right. So Shirl, what is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
I think the number one barrier, which looking back is probably also one of my number one blessings, is adversity. And, over the course of my life, whether it was being homeless or not understanding how I'm going to get from Maine to Wall Street, or how I'm going to raise capital in the middle of a financial crisis in 2008 when I started the journey for Dynasty, or to convince, the early stage team members to come in and just work for equity and trust me to work, or asking those first few clients, to trust me that when, they launch their firm with our new business, this idea is going to be real and it's going to work. But that adversity, and those battle scars, that I have now, I think is a tremendous asset. It's made me tougher. It's made me who I am. And I think at the end of the day, it's now a huge differentiator for us, is that we are entrepreneurs serving other entrepreneurs. And we've done, and I have done what so many of our clients aspire to do, in that peer-to-peer empathy and proximity and understanding, I think is a real differentiator. So even though it was really hard, dealing with the level of adversity that I've had in my life, I wouldn't change a thing.
Love it, my friend. Shirl, such a pleasure having you on the show. So grateful for you to share your story with our listeners and just to learn more about you and actually get to meet you, my friend. So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Darius.
Well, you guys, listen, if there's anything, we love sharing the information we learn here. You got to share this story with entrepreneurs, because I think this is one of the greatest come up stories I've gotten to hear on this show. And like Shirl said, that we learn by sharing, and it is a gift. And I appreciate I feel honored to get to share this information with our listeners and with the world, and to share your story as well. So thank you guys. Till next time, peace out. We love you. You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on, so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.